Okay. I really don't care to talk into the microphone, but I guess I have to. Thank you so much for being an amazing audience for the Tiger Leadership Panel. I hope you got something out of that as you are on that second half of freshman year. This session, we are going to be hearing from one of our amazing Brevard County Sheriff's Office speakers. Some of you have seen him before. He should be here momentarily. If you guys could just sit tight for a couple of minutes, he'll be here in just a moment. Thanks. Okay, so our speakers have arrived. I am going to let them introduce themselves and tell a little bit about themselves, and then we're going to talk about making good choices.
Hello, how you guys doing? Pretty good, right? It's been a kind of a soggy day. Probably in for a soggy day for the next couple of days, according to what I'm looking at the weather. My name is Jay Martinez. I work at the Sheriff's Office, and I've been there for probably about 18 years now. And I started out just like every other deputy sheriff, working 911 calls and going to emergencies. And it was interesting because when I started, I was only 22 years old, right? And I saw a lot of things that I didn't necessarily see growing up. I grew up, both my parents were ordained ministers, and I went to private school most of my life. And then for high school, I went to Melbourne High School, and it was kind of normal school, whatever. And just went to the police academy, and then from there got hired at the sheriff's office. And I started to see different perspectives of different people, living their life in ways that I just wasn't used to seeing. So on topic of making good choices, you don't really realize what the consequence of your choice is until that consequence hits you in the face, right? And it can be something as simple as, a lifestyle choice or, a career choice or anything. And it's interesting to see how that can change your life and where you end up. And I always ask my kids, because I have kids as well, kind of in high school, and you always get this question like around 9th, 10th, 11th grade, what are you going to be? Like, what are you going to be when you grow up? Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And you always ask that question, and they always have these incredible answers. Like, oh, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever it is. And you may ask yourself that question or have been asked that question, and you have an idea in your mind as to what it is you want to do. And it's interesting because if you change the question a little bit, you get a little more perspective as far as where you might end up. So instead of asking yourself, what is it that you want to be, which is kind of a vision, like you close your eyes, you see yourself as being something else, you can ask yourself, what am I working towards being, right? So if I asked you, and I won't put anyone on the spot, but if I asked you, what do you want to be, you probably have an answer. But if I change the question and I said, what are you working towards being? You might say, well, I don't know. Like if you don't have a plan to get to whatever it is that when you close your eyes you have that vision, if you don't have a plan and you're not doing things every single day to make it there, then chances are you're not going to be there. And I say that because when you look back at your life, when you're older, right? I'm older now, like at 40 years old. I look back and I say to myself, was I going to be a police officer? Did I grow up and go to high school and all these things and say, hey, I'm going to be a deputy sheriff at the Brevard County Sheriff's Office? Was that what I put on my little career paper at school? No, right? It wasn't even close to that. And so you may have a little false sense of security as far as what you think you're going to be able to accomplish if you don't set some goals in place. And if you don't have goals, then you're not going to make it to where it is that you think you may be. Now, I'm not saying you're going to end up in a bad place. You could not. But if you don't start that stuff now, then you may find that you're going to be derailed by the time you get to the age where you think that you were going to attain what you were going to attain. So with goal setting in mind, it's a good idea to set goals. It's a good idea to write those goals down. And it's a good idea to make sure that you're doing things every single day to work towards that. I talked at a school maybe 3 years ago now, and I had a young man in ROTC class. It was Vieira High School, and I asked him, what did you want to be? And he says, oh, I want to be a running back in the NFL. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And I told him to, and he was kind of an outgoing kid, so it wasn't really so bad for him. But I told him to put a little marker on the board with a marker, and told him to write down his routine for the past 3 weeks, right? And he wrote down, well, I would get up, go to school, come home, play video games, eat Oreos, whatever it was. And none of that in the past 3 weeks included working out, running at like every single day, like running plays or whatever you would have to do to become a professional running back. And he came to the realization that although he had an idea of something he wanted to do, all the stuff that he was doing wasn't even going close to that, right? It wasn't leading him down that path. So that's just another way to kind of say it again. Make sure that you set some goals and that you also allocate some time management towards those goals. Like if you're spending all your time not accomplishing your goals, what are you working towards? Right? Because you're always working towards something. And if you're not working towards what it is you want to be, you may be unknowingly working towards something you don't want to be, right? Something very, very simple like getting a traffic ticket can affect your options in life. I got a traffic ticket when I was in high school for driving without my glasses. I did not know that you could get arrested for driving without your glasses. Did you know that? Raise your hand if you knew that. Yeah, driving outside of the restrictions of your license. I didn't know that, right? So I got a ticket, and it wasn't just a regular ticket. It was a criminal ticket. So I was a criminal, right? I was labeled as a criminal. So when I go to do my background investigation at the sheriff's office, they say, have you ever been arrested? Have you ever been charged with a crime? And I was like, no, never. I'm a good person. I've never been charged with a crime. So they do the background investigation. Next thing you know, they have this sheet of paper that has me on it as a what? A criminal, a person who committed a misdemeanor, convicted misdemeanor. So I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, now I'm in a position where I have to either A, explain why I didn't know that, or B, it's going to look like I'm lying. It's a very, very strange position to be in. And if you lie on an application, or if, especially for a law enforcement or any kind of job in that kind of industry, you're not going to be able to be hired. So now I'm sitting at a table trying to explain the circumstance of not knowing and not realizing that that was a criminal offense and all these things. And it was just one simple mistake that I had made, right? And that wasn't necessarily a decision. It was more kind of a mistake. I was at the beach, lost my glasses, whatever it was. But something as small as that can have ramifications later on in life. Normally we talk about making good choices when you're on social media, when you're hanging out with friends, drug abuse, all these things, they're all involved in making good choices. And we always tell people, make sure that you make good choices. But we don't always say like why. We don't give you enough of the backstory. So I'll tell you a little bit about some of the things that I've seen throughout my career and some of the things that people have said. And one thing that I like to kind of focus on, because I think it's just important, is nicotine use. Raise your hand if you've ever known someone or who uses nicotine. Yeah, right? And it's becoming a lot more available and a lot more easy to use. And it seems kind of innocent at first because, it's legal, and I know they just raised the legal age for it. But it seems like a legal thing, so it's not that big of a deal, whatever. But it can affect the way you go through life. And here's an example of what that is. I arrested a guy probably 10 years ago now, and I arrested him for drug use. And he had some kind of pill or something that he melted down into a spoon, and he was like sucking it up in these little syringes, and he was basically overdosing. And arrested this guy several times, And one day he's in the back of my car, and I'm talking to him, and I'm like, hey, man, because I just wanted to know. I was like, hey, why the drugs? Why? And he goes, I don't know. It makes everything numb. It makes life easier. And I said, if you could pick one drug that would be the hardest to quit, what would it be? And without even skipping a beat, this guy had done cocaine, he'd done heroin, all these things. He said, without skipping a beat, nicotine. And I was like, nicotine, really? He goes, yes, I will never give up cigarettes. And I thought that was the strangest thing. So why? So that led me to do a little bit of research. And when you look at research in nicotine, there's an age, right, that if you start getting exposed to nicotine, there's an age right between the ages of 11 and 17, and that little sweet spot right there. If your brain is introduced to nicotine at that point, it is very hard, very, very hard to stop that from happening. That's why the age for using that stuff is a little bit higher, right? It's not necessarily because it's dangerous, but it's also have lifelong ramifications. You're not going to be able to get yourself off that kind of stuff. So when you think about that product, that nicotine, because that's what it is, right? It's a product. It's a drug, but it's a product designed to keep a customer for life, right? That's the idea behind it. That's the idea behind every single drug. That's like the best business plan ever, right? If I could have a customer who just has to come back, I think Chick-fil-A does this, right? You just have to come back. You can never not go there. I'm just kidding. But they do this thing to get you addicted to their product. So if you start looking at drugs and alcohol through the eyes of what the producer is actually trying to do, it'll give you a little bit more perspective and hopefully a little bit more confidence as far as making the choice on whether or not to try that. I would hate to be able to try something and then never be able to not have it in my life, right? Because then that other person is one. It's the same thing with any other drug. It's also the same thing with social media, right? The people who developed drugs and the process that your body goes through to get addicted to that particular drug is the same person or same people that design things that are addicting for whatever reason. When you find that you use drugs, that there's a chemical process in your body that kind of starts, right? When you use nicotine, it goes to your brain. Your brain, processes this chemical, and then your brain does something with it and makes your body feel a certain way. So, in a way, that process helps your body feel a certain way. It's kind of like going to a baseball game. If you strike out, you feel depressed. If you hit a home run, you feel awesome. It has nothing to do with drugs. It has to do with what's going on in your body. And your body likes that feeling. Well, there's ways to recreate that feeling. You can recreate that feeling through drugs. You can recreate that feeling through getting 6,000 likes on a particular video or views or whatever, and getting that feel of fame or fake fame or whatever it is that you would get from the internet. And the problem with that, there's a show on Netflix. What's that show called? The Social Dilemma. Have you guys seen that? No? You should watch that. Watch that show. It's called The Social Dilemma, and it breaks down how a company uses social media to literally addict the user. And when you use social media, you are under the impression that it's free, right? Well, it's free. It's no big deal. It's free, free, free. But that product is actually designed for a customer. And the customer is the person who puts the ad on the social media, right? Now you have social media A, social media B, whatever it is, Instagram, TikTok, whichever one you choose, they're all competing, and this is what is in the documentary, it's kind of cool. They're all competing for your attention, right? They want you to be as much on this as possible so that the chances of an advertiser being able to show you an ad is higher, right? So it's kind of interesting when you look at it that way, that they're developing a product designed to hook a user so that the actual customer, which is the person selling the ad, gets that product. So I, as let's say a TikTok salesman to a group of advertisers, would say the average person between the ages of 10 and 14 use our app 3 hours a day. 3 hours a day unsupervised. And these people think, okay, well, these are the types of ads we can run. This is how we can create this customer starting all the way from 10 years old, all the way through 18 and through your entire life. They kind of follow you and they push certain products into your life to make you more of a customer for them. So making good decisions can't happen unless you have all the information. So if you're ever faced with something where you're like, okay, is this a good thing for me or is this a bad thing for me? Well, you can't make that decision unless you get all the information, right? So you have to have all the information. Research is very important when it comes to anything that's involved in your life. Where you're going to go to college, what you're going to do what are you working towards being when you're an adult, what social media platforms, even what friends you have, right? If you look at, there's a group of, a category of things called personal development, things that you do to try to make yourself better. And one of those things talks about your friends. And one of the things I read there was like your net worth or your network is equal to your net worth. Like, meaning that you can take 5 or 6 people that you hang out with, and chances are you're going to be just like them, right? So if you surround yourself with people who are just, maybe they don't have the same goals you do, or they're not into the same things you do, at some point you're going to be more like those people, right? You just kind of all become like this conglomerate of the same type of person, and then you go on your way. But if you surround yourself with people who are motivated, who are intelligent, who are driven to do certain things, you're going to notice that they're going to bring out those qualities in you. So that's another, even with the people that you hang out with when it comes to decision making, what can I do to make myself better? Instead of hanging out with people who are fun for X, Y, Z, why don't I surround myself with people who are more driven to do things to get me to my goals? You're at an age now where it's kind of weird, because you can do things that can get you in a lot of trouble for a very long time, or you can do things that can get you in a little bit of trouble and then it goes away because you're underage, right? Doing things like maybe stealing something, maybe getting into a minor altercation at school or something like that can possibly go away. But doing things like committing online crimes, even online crimes that you may not even realize that you're committing, can actually stick for a long time. There is a program that they just released now to help kids with this process because it happens so much. For example, you're on social media and someone sends you something and it's a picture, or is a picture of a person or something, and it's pornographic in nature. So now you have that on your phone. Just because you have it on your phone automatically makes you susceptible to being in possession of what they call either child pornography or sexting, right? These are 2 statutes, Florida statutes, right? Sexting is a Florida statute that gets a lot of youth in trouble. And it doesn't matter how old the person is on the phone or what the context is. If the person is in that picture and they don't have their clothes on, right? You're in possession of that stuff. Now, if you take that and you send that to someone else, right? Just because you're forwarding that or whatever, you actually can be charged with a misdemeanor and then up to a felony, depending on how many times you do that. Now, they just created a diversion program for that type of incident because it happens a lot. And it's helping people with their criminal histories, because if you think about it, you do something like that maybe when you're 13, 14, 15 because you think it's funny, or you just want to send it to someone else, and unknowingly now you're committing a felony, and something happens because someone else reports this, it all comes back to you, and next thing you know, you have a person who's now 18 years old. They can't get a job because they're a convicted sex offender, right? A convicted sex offender doesn't have the same rights as everyone else. They can't do things like live in the same neighborhood as everyone else. Like, there's certain things that they can't do that makes their life very difficult. Anytime they move anywhere, they have to register, and it's just a very difficult life to live. And it's terrible, because if someone unknowingly forwarded a picture to someone else, they didn't necessarily want to go down that road, but that's the person that they end up becoming, or at least being labeled as. And it's very hard to go through life with that kind of stuff. Another thing that you got to really think about are the consequences of life and death, right? You go to a party or whatever it is, and you have this unintended consequence where you were just going there to invite a few friends, and the next thing you know, the party grows, and then one person does something, and then the other person tries to outdo that person, and then someone gets hurt, right? If that party is at your house, you have a problem. Right? You have a problem. If you're the person that orchestrated that party, or if you're the person that invited someone to that party and someone gets hurt, you're going to have a problem, right? And you're going to have a problem that you may not have the resources to handle, right? I don't know that anyone has a personal attorney or insurance for certain things, right? Because you're just not there yet. So that problem is going to become your problem and your family's problem. And that's something that can stick for a very long time. When people start getting hurt, things get very serious very quickly. When people start getting killed, people start getting arrested. So think about it even as something, as simple as driving on a day like today with the rain, you know what I mean? If you're driving too fast for conditions, you run a red light, you get a ticket, whatever. You run a red light, you hit someone crossing the street, now you're going to jail, right? So it's very important to really think about it and just be careful. An age between I don't know, I say younger than 21, you have this feeling of like almost invincibility, like, it's going to be fine, my life is good, I'm strong, whatever. That fades, and don't let that feeling, push you into a sense of overconfidence where you start making bad decisions. So I want to give you guys a chance to ask a few questions. Any question you want to ask a cop ever in your entire life, don't be ashamed, throw it out there, and I'll get my partner Pam up here in a little bit. If I can't answer the question, maybe she can answer it for you. But we'll kind of start this way, and then we'll go that way. What questions you got for me? Any question at all, doesn't matter. Go ahead. Right. Getting in trouble, right? Of course, yeah, you would think that, but no, you wouldn't get in trouble. Are you going to be involved? Absolutely, right? They would take a statement from you. They were going to have to maybe download some of that content from your phone, and then if it comes to pressing charges and going to court, they may even have to call you to testify. It just depends on the circumstances of that case. But are you going to get in trouble for showing an authority something that you received on your phone? No, but it depends, right? If you show them, it's like, I just got this. Hey, look, I want to make this report, right? And the time frame was like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 24 hours, no big deal. But if you feel like someone is investigating the school and person A gets interviewed, person B gets interviewed, and this happened 3 months ago, and then all of a sudden you're like, I want to make a report of this stuff I got on my phone. You know what I mean? And they're going to be like, well, wait a minute. Are you making this report because you're scared now, or are you making this report because you're truly a victim? So make sure that if you are going to report something, that you do it sincerely and that you do it in a timely manner. Otherwise, sometimes it may come off as you just trying to hide information. So good question. What else you got for me? Any questions? Any topics? Anything you want to talk about? This is like your opportunity to ask a cop anything that you could ever think of asking. And you'll get the real answer. And no one has any questions? Like, how fast can I drive before I get pulled over? What does it feel like to get tased? Is it too early to talk about this stuff? No questions? Oh, there's a question. Go ahead. Hi.
Talk about how maybe some of the choices now that they're making might affect even college.
Yeah, yeah,
Things like that.
yeah.
Where it hits home for them and maybe parents at the same time.
Sure. Going back to what I said about the glasses store getting hired at the sheriff's office. So there's a background process that happens not just for a job, but sometimes to go to a college. And this background process is pretty intense. I actually used to be a background investigator, and there were things that we would look at that people really didn't think that we would be looking at. Generally, when you think about going to a college, you think about the interview. And you're going to go in the interview, you're going to wear something specific, they're going to ask you certain questions. So you go there with the mindset of that as being professional as possible, blah, blah, blah. Sitting on the other side of that table as the interviewer, we know that the person in front of us isn't a real representation of that person, right? That person is trying to sell themselves. That person has done everything, hopefully they have, right? They've done everything right to try to convince me that they are the right person to either get the job or to go to the school. The background investigator's job is to find out exactly who you really are, right? And one of the easiest ways to do that is with open source intelligence, right? Open source intelligence is just free information that you can find on the internet. And there's lots of websites that you can use for free to find out things like what social media accounts people use, what usernames, what emails, and those are the free services. But you can actually pay just a little bit of money and get a lot of information about a particular person. You can start getting things like their specific messages that they've sent, the specific pictures, all this stuff that you put on the internet gets indexed and gets put somewhere, right? Once you post it on the internet, it no longer belongs to you. It now belongs to everyone, and everyone has access to that information if they know how to find it. If you don't know, or if you don't believe me, when you get a chance, the open source, look at open source intelligence techniques, and you'll see that you'll be able to get a lot of information about people. What types of information are we looking for? We're looking for people who they associate with. right? Remember we talked about you're going to be most like the 5 people that you hang out with. Well, if I just look at the profiles of your top 5 friends or the people that you interact with the most, I can get an idea of the type of person you are. For example, you come into the job interview or to the college interview, I'm a nice person, this, and that, but I look at your social media and it tells me a completely different story, right? You got like a 60-foot beer bong or whatever it is, you know what I mean? And you're doing all this crazy stuff, and that tells me who you really are. And that person may be denied that opportunity. It's happened to our deputy applicants many, many times. Many people have been disqualified for their Facebook posts. Many people have been disqualified for Twitter, for TikTok, and even now people have been disciplined and or fired for things that they've posted, right? And they may not have meant to do any harm, but in doing so, using social media, they did. For example, there was a deputy who was at a scene of a crash, and he thought it would be smart to take a video of that crash and then post it to social media, right? For what? For likes, for followers, I don't know. For got in trouble, that's what happened, right? You can't do that kind of stuff. So, the things that you post on social media will stick around. They'll stick around for a long time, and they may prevent you from getting those opportunities in the future that you may think you may be entitled to. So be very, very careful with the things that you post. Make sure that the person that you are in person is the same person that you are online. We kind of have these 2 personas, right? And if those 2 things don't match, then there's no credibility to who you are in person, right? So make sure that those 2 things are the same. If you're into ABC in person, then be into ABC online, but don't act like one way in person and then online be a completely different person. It just doesn't make sense, and it's not fair to people who are trying to choose you for a job or a college. What else you got for me? Okay, so we talked about the criminal ticket, right? Things that you can actually get arrested for. So can you get arrested for speeding? Yeah, but there's a certain threshold that you have to get to in order for that to happen. But in general, a speeding ticket is just a what we call a civil traffic violation, and it's handled either through a court, through paying a fine, or going through a traffic school, and then there's a 4th option as well. But a DUI ticket is a little bit different. It's a ticket that charges you criminally. And what that means is that you have to go to a court and you have to see a judge about that particular crime, and you can choose whether or not to get represented, and something will happen in addition to paying money, right? So you may have to pay court fines, you may have to serve jail time, and there'll be some added penalties like losing your license. If you get arrested for a DUI, they take away your license, and depending on your circumstance, they may give you a special license, like one that just says you can drive to work and back, right? Or just to school and back. But that's it. So if you're caught driving anywhere other than those 2 places or going to or from those 2 places, then you go to jail again, now again for your or for driving outside of the restrictions of your license. So that's kind of the difference between the 2. A DUI you can go to jail for. A speeding ticket, generally you don't get arrested for. They both take money. They both take significantly different amounts of money. Speeding ticket on the higher end is probably close to about $300, but anywhere from I'd say $90 to $300 on a speeding ticket. But for a DUI, you will pay no less than $10,000 for the process, right? You have to go to court. You have to get your car towed. You have to get your license reinstated. All of that really doesn't cost that much. What costs the most is your insurance premium, right? Because now you're a person who has to insure their car who has a prior DUI. They tack on this extra fee. It is astronomical. And over the course of about 3 years, it takes between 3 and 5 years for them to remove that. You will pay tons and tons of money just because you have that history of DUI. So don't do it, right? It's very, very simple. Don't do it. It's easier now, too, than ever because it's more common for people to Uber or to carpool or car share or whatever it is. So there's really just no excuse for anything like that. So I even tell kids all the time, if you're in a position where you find yourself and maybe you have made a stupid decision and you've done something that you weren't supposed to, don't make more stupid decisions on top of the stupid decision, right? Get yourself home safe. Make sure that you call someone, call your parent or whatever, like, look, I messed up. This is what's going on. Pick me up or get a ride or whatever it is. Because if you do something else and you end up killing someone or hurting someone, that can be something that can haunt you for a long time. What else you got? What are the questions?
What kind of car
So, police car or regular car? All right, all right. A police car I have is a 2000, I believe it's a 2010 Dodge Charger. The first ones that we had were Crown Victorias, which was the perfect police car. It's that regular boxy-looking car that we've had. And then they stopped making it. So law enforcement agencies all over the United States had to figure out what other car they were going to use. Generally, they like to go with either Ford, Chevy, or Dodge. So we tried all three, Ford, Chevy, Dodge. And you'll see when you see sheriff's cars, there's a mixture of Ford, Chevy, and Dodge. And that was just kind of what we were going through at the time. Now, we've, I think, gone exclusively back to Ford. So a lot of the cars that you'll see would be Ford Explorers, like the SUV style. That's what Pam has there. And you would think that they would be a whole lot more faster than the regular car, right? But they're really not. It's just a stock car. For example, Dodge Charger is a stock Dodge Charger, the same one that you would get at the lot. It's actually a little less nice than the one that you would get at the lot because on the floor of the car there's no carpet. The seats are very rugged. They actually take the back seat out and they put a piece of plastic in there, right? And they just make it very, very durable. A lot of the front displays and everything, like sometimes on a stock car you'll have like little lines of chrome. All that stuff is taken off. It's just very bland and very dark inside. The only thing that is really upgraded in a police car is the suspension, right? So the suspension is always a little bit stiffer, and it makes it a little easier to take corners and stuff like that. But as far as engine improvements and any of that stuff, no. It's just a regular old police car, man. Go ahead. The fastest I've ever driven in a police car was probably about 110 to 115 miles an hour, which is a huge, and this was long ago, right? I've been at the sheriff's for 18 years, right? Long ago. That is more of like something you can't do anymore, right? There is a new thing that they have that they've installed in every single police car, and it's a GPS, and it basically reports how fast the car is going. Why? Because deputies are crashing their cars all the time, and it was costing money to replace those cars. So you put a GPS in the car, and all of a sudden everyone's driving the way they're supposed to. Now, if you are driving to an emergency, let's say there's a crash on 95 and you're trying to get there, you may be wondering, well, how fast can I go to get to that crash? Really, it's the speed limit, right? There's nothing in the statute that says just because you have your lights on that you get to drive faster, right? Now, do we drive faster? Yeah, but it's really not as fast as you would think. It's probably somewhere between 88 and 90 miles an hour, which if you drive a regular car on 95, you'll see people, if you're going 70 or 80, they'll pass you. So you'll see it's really not that fast. But the perspective in a police car is kind of funny because if you go 70, no one passes you. It's kind of cool. So it's like you can slow everyone else down. But yeah, that's about the fastest the car will go. So good question. And if you go over a certain speed with that GPS, there's alarms that go off, and they send emails and text messages so that the comm center and everyone knows that that car is going fast. So the first thing people want to know is why. You know, are you chasing someone? Is there an emergency? Oh, it's like, oh, I'm just late for, Dunkin' Donuts. It's like, oh, well, you're in trouble, So good question. What else you got? Canine questions, SWAT questions, helicopter questions. Y'all need some Mountain Dew, right? Go ahead. What made me become a sheriff? Circumstances, man. I needed a job, right? Like I said, it wasn't something that I always thought, oh, I'm going to do this, for my whole life. I never thought, no. When I got out of high school, I was working with a buddy. Remember, you're going to become like your friends, right? That whole story. My buddy and his dad had a business where they were installing sprinklers and wells, where you get water out of the ground, a well. So he's like, hey, come work with us, Okay, cool. So I start working with him, and that's what I'm doing. So basically construction, but working irrigation and wells. And I got married very young, got married at 19 years old, and I realized that we were starting a family at 20 years old. And I was digging sprinklers, working for my buddy. And my wife didn't have a job. So how am I going to have this baby? I have no insurance. I have no real house. I mean, I lived in a small apartment with my wife and her brother, but it's like, this isn't a good start. I got to do something. So I thought to myself, I need to get a job that pays a lot of money. So I go to my buddy and say, let's start a band, right? So we started a band, and we started playing music, and we were making some money, right? Playing, bars and stuff at night, but it's still, there was no insurance, there was none of that stuff. And although it was fun, it wasn't something that was going to be sustainable. So I had to look and see, okay, what's my college? What college did I go to? Oh, I didn't go to college, so all I have is a high. Okay, so how can I make X amount of dollars? And I came to two things. It was the post office or the police department. So which one do you think I applied for? The post office. Right? I applied for the post office, did everything I needed to do, and it happened. It turned out that my buddy's dad's wife worked for the post office. That's how I even got the idea, right? Remember, you're going to be like your friends. And the post office was like, no, we don't want you. So then the only other thing I had was the police academy. So I got into the police academy because you had to basically get yourself in there, and got in there, kind of took it as seriously as I could, and passed all the tests, which were a little bit harder than I thought they were going to be, and ended up working at the sheriff's office because truly I needed a job that could support a family, and that's what happened. And I was limited. I don't say limited because it's a good career, but limited because I didn't go to college. I didn't really do all the things that I could have done if I had used my time a little bit more wisely and planned better and set a higher goals for myself. So, good question. Go ahead. Yeah. Well, when you work in Brevard, it's a very long county, right? So 95 sometimes, especially at night, is pretty empty. And if you have to get from one end of the county to the other, you got to get from one county. You know what I mean? So that was a circumstance for there. But have I ever been in a chase? Yes, absolutely. The chases are a little less frequent now because usually chases end in crashes. Crashes are expensive. People die. People get sued. People get fired. And you were chasing them because they stole, their ex-girlfriend's purse or something stupid, right? So you'll see that police chases are a little less common now, and because the technology is a little bit easier or is a little bit more advanced, and you can follow cars with using cameras and using different things. But yeah, we've been in multiple police chases. They're not as fun as you would think. They're actually kind of scary, and the worst part is when it does end in a crash, and it's either the bad guy crashes or you crash, and then you'll realize that most pursuits are probably only about 5 or 6 minutes, if that, and there's like 5 or 6 weeks of work that you have to do to justify all that and put a case together, and it's just kind of intense. So, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of an adrenaline rush, but it's a lot more work than it's worth, for sure. Go ahead. Well, so that's a good question, right? Very, very good question. My answer to you would be that you drive the speed limit, right? You definitely want to drive the speed limit, drive as safe as possible. There's something called a wolf pack when you're on 95, and that means it's almost like NASCAR, right? There's a car. They're all in a line. They're all going 80, right? That is the most dangerous scenario to get in because you've seen a NASCAR race, right? One person wobbles. Next thing you know, this person hits the brakes. Next thing you know, right? So that's a wolf pack. So when you say match the speed of everyone else around you, that's kind of what you're doing. You're putting yourself in that wolf pack scenario. It can be three lanes wide, going a certain speed. You can travel like that, but it's very dangerous because you're hoping that everyone else in that pack stays in their lane and doesn't make a mistake, doesn't text, doesn't do anything. So the best thing to do would be to find a buffer where you have a good following distance. There's really not too many cars on the side. There's not too many cars behind you. You'll find your own little pocket of highway, and then maintain whatever speed you need to maintain to without going, more than 6 or 7 miles over the speed limit to maintain that bubble, right? So you want to have more empty space around you than you do have cars. So kind of use that. Good question. What else you got? How much time do we have? That's interesting to know. Yeah. 5 minutes. Okay. Any other questions for me? Go ahead. The most interesting person I arrested. I always go back to this story. There was you deal with many different people in law enforcement, and then so you never really know what you're going to get. And sometimes the things that you hear on the radio aren't necessarily the things that you're going to encounter. So I get a call one day that there is a person trying to break into a house, and it's way on the south end of the county. And I go down there, and sure enough, I see a person on the porch of a house banging on the front door trying to get in. So it was what was reported to me. But you learn after a few years that maybe that's not as exciting as a thing that you would think, because you have to find out what the whole story is. So I go up to talk to this person, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm trying to get into my house. Well, it's a slightly different story, right? You can't arrest someone for breaking into their house. So I'm like, okay, well, come on down here. People are calling saying that someone's trying to break into the house. And he goes, I am. I'm trying to break into my house. I said, all right, no big deal. Talked to him a little bit more. Found out it wasn't his house. He was off his medication, right? And I asked him about his medical history, stuff like that. So he's telling me that he is off his medication. He is under the impression that his medication is in that house, and he's trying to get it. So I say, listen, you're going to need some kind of medical transport. We're going to have to take you somewhere to be seen medically. And he was totally okay with that. He was like, all right, yeah, no problem. I said, but before we do that, there's this big bulge in his pocket. And I'm like, what is in your pocket? We're going to have to make sure that it's not a weapon or anything like that. And he goes, oh, no, it's fine. It's a rabbit. Right? That's kind of weird. I was like, what do you mean a rabbit? Like, are you telling me there's a rabbit? He goes, yes, sir. There's a rabbit in my pants. So I say, okay. Now it's like, what do? Do I reach in there and grab this rabbit, or do I let him do it? What do I do? So I make the decision to let him retrieve the rabbit, to which he goes in there and he pulls out a snow globe, right? So it's a snow globe, and you shake it up, you know what I mean, with all the little stuff inside. It wasn't a rabbit. It wasn't it was like a person on a bench. I don't even know what it was. And that's what it was. And I think that might have been what he was using to try to get in the house, but he called it a rabbit, whatever. He got in the back of the car, and taking him over to the hospital or medical facility, and I'm trying to engage him in conversation, and he's not talking to me. He's not saying anything. All he keeps saying is that I'm afraid of bridges. So I said, okay. I start to think about my path to the hospital. There's no way I'm going to get there without crossing a bridge. So this is going to be pretty interesting, right? So I'm driving, and the guy is cool, calm, collected, whatever it is. As soon as my front tires hit the bridge to go over the bridge, like the causeway, he immediately started screaming, bloody murder, trying to get out of my patrol car, right? At the top of his lungs. You would thought that he had a beehive back there with him, and just the way he was struggling, right? So what do? Like, you just got to keep on going. Certainly I'm not going to stop in the middle of traffic. He wasn't really hurting himself. He was just kind of being absolutely crazy. So as soon as my front tires hit the street after the bridge, like as soon as we got totally calm. So that was the weirdest thing. It just always stuck in my mind. It was the craziest thing. Good question. What else you got? That's it? That's all the questions? Wow. Well, thank you guys for having me. Do me a favor. Take one hand, go like this. Take the other one, go like this. And I want you to bring them together really slow. And then apart. Look at them together. Apart, together, apart, together, apart, together. There you go. Very nice. All right. If you have any other questions that you think of throughout the day, ask Corporal Spencer. He'll answer them all for you. All right.
Ninth grade, quick question. Will you raise your hand? Raise your hand if you do not have your computer with you and ready to go today. Is there anybody who does not have their device? One. Anyone else? Okay, because you will need it, and we just want to make sure you have one at our sessions today where it is needed. Okay. Enjoy break.